What will we have? Let me know. Let me know.
Well, hello and welcome to the Psychedelic Diaries. I am your host, Ray Christian, and do we have a good show for you? Adam Deffett, CEO of Ketamine One, will be on the show momentarily. As usual, we'll end the show picking two psychedelic companies for a slap and a clap. And we will start the show off, as usual, with a nugget and a noodle. Today's news nugget: Beckley Psytech $80 million raise. Now, for those unfamiliar, Beckley is one of the good guys. Their team, including a couple of my favorites, Andy Page and Becky Hutchinson, are charming and sharp as hell. Cosmo Fielding Mellon at the helm, and his mother, a living legend, Lady Amanda Fielding, is there advising. So chalk one up for the good guys, and congratulations to Beckley. As for the noodle, producer Kevin, I think it's time to start looking at segmenting different types of psychedelic users, like an ER doctor that's triaging patients, or perhaps a tech entrepreneur that's building out cohorts. We need to start thinking about different types of users because one size fits all ain't gonna cut it. So for instance, maybe a few personas. The high-risk patient, let's call him Tough Time Tommy. The so-so patient, let's call her Training Wheels Tiffany. And then there's the stable patient. Let's call him DIY Dave. And then, of course, there will be the recreational users. Let's call her Socialite Stephanie. They're all going to be there, and they all have different needs. So maybe it's time to start thinking about providing different tools. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may direct your attention, he is the CEO of Ketamine One, Adam Deffett. Thank you for joining the show.
Hi, Ray. Well, thank you for having me on.
Okay, well, let's dive right in. Adam, Ketamine One appears to be taking a pretty novel approach in this industry with VR, wearables. And I got to say, Adam, I love this wearables angle to perhaps start mapping traditional biomarkers with mental health metrics. I'm curious to hear, how did you and the team arrive at that focus?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Ray. We're looking for something to bring in some of the great technology and device and work that's being done on the technology side, but identifying that nothing has been done exclusively on mental health. So, how can we capture and use all this great data that's out there and apply it more towards mental health? Wearables was something we started focusing on, several months ago, but realized it wasn't a solution in and of itself. I mean, there's lots of wearable products out there. Some natural questions. One is, how do you relate that physical data, those biomarkers, to what's happening to you and your mental health? We know anecdotally and through some studies how different things like sleep, movement, other things affect your mood, affect your well-being. But, how can you really track and develop it, especially when you're talking about more major indications and people with wider range of problems? So number one is, how do we take the wearables that are out there and really make them useful for mental health applications? And two was, what do you do with this data? I think we're, as a society and technology, all these products, we're getting so much data, the raw data, but what do we do with that? How do we correlate it to what's going on in our life? Because at the end of the day, I got to think, not just for us, but for everyone is, how are you improving people's lives? How are you improving patient outcomes? And so, it was looking at wearables, looking at technology that's out there, and then saying, how do we capitalize on this to relate it to what we're doing, and make the data something that's empowering as opposed to something that weighs on you and you wonder, what do I do with all of this information?
I really like that. And it's not easy. It is a Herculean task to make sense of all this data. So I appreciate your approach. And also, I really like your newsletter, by the way. Very clean, well-written, informative. And I was looking at what you guys are doing. You've got this veteran-focused clinic. You've got this tech angle, as we just touched on. and this research focus as well with this KGK acquisition. Congrats on that deal, by the way. What's coming down the pipeline, Adam, that's got your engine revved a bit?
It's funny, Ray, we haven't talked about this, but you touched on what we call our three silos of the business. There's, the research element. We've got our own CRO, contract research organization, which is KGK. We've obviously got the clinics. We're very excited about expanding that network. And then we've got the technology. And so we don't want to overcomplicate the story. We want to stay within those lanes, but really develop them and integrate them further. So I think what makes us very different than a lot of comparables out there is one, admittedly, we are not a drug development company. I think there's great work being done. There's a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of exciting trials that are out there. I think, what we realize as a company and as a group is that one, that's expensive and it's a different risk profile. There's people that have to do it. It's great work, but we weren't going to compete in there, especially as a smaller company. That's not small company work that needs to be done. So we wanted to focus on what was not only exciting about psychedelics, but let's all face it, we're a public company. We also need to create a business. As much as we want to support the good things that are going on and bring these solutions to patients and help people, we are a corporation. We're talking to investors. We got to make things that can create a sustainable business.
Keeping it simple and staying in the lane. And I think that's a recipe for success, especially when you've got a lot of different paths you could take. Speaking of that, Adam, the guy, I want to get a glimpse into you a little bit. You are a capital markets experienced exec. And anytime a guy like you that's got the Gordon Gekko, blue horseshoe, loves Endicott steel vibes going, where you can get your finger in a bunch of different pies and kind of live vicariously through a variety of industries. When a guy like you says, no, this is the one I'm going all in on, I think it's very telling. So I'm curious for you, what was the moment where you said, no, I'm going into psychedelics and mental health?
It's from a really high level, that 30,000 foot view is it's of enormous interest to me, especially the mental health angle, because I think this is the dialogue and the narrative around mental health is changing so rapidly right now, and it's very needed. And I think that's really exciting. Just talking about mental health, let's say back away from even psychedelics. So that part is extremely interesting. As a business guy, as a capital markets guy, boil it down really simply: supply, demand. And we know what's happening right now with demand. We know that people are increasingly suffering with different types of mental health issues. From the whole spectrum, people that are really suffering and debilitating, different diseases and things that they need extreme help with, to people just recognizing more what mental health means, what it means to be healthy, not only physically. So there's a huge spectrum of things. To be honest, I've been involved in cannabis and seen the hype and what happened, and I think. If this industry does it right, there's a very different proposition here. This is about creating medicine and really creating a new type of treatment and just possibilities for people. And it's not to take away from what cannabis is, just the way that, it's been turned into a business and a market that's created some issues. And I think psychedelics have a different path as long as we can stick to it.
I love that. And I appreciate that cannabis analogy. I think you're right on the money. The use case for psychedelics, if you're going to break down the medicinal versus recreational percentage, psychedelics has a much bigger potential for true medicinal use rather than cannabis. So I appreciate that comp. Speaking of that, coming from cannabis, going into psychedelics, you've been in the industry for a little while now. Adam, what has surprised you as you've gotten a little bit deeper in the industry?
Yeah, there's surprises around every corner. I think one of the different things is really on a day-to-day basis is in the interaction with the medical community. Really how much of a fabricated topic this is within whether it's doctors, clinicians, other people. I can have a conversation with an anesthesiologist and just get such a high level of excitement and passion for what's going on, and then you talk to a person, same generation, same education, everything else, and totally different perspective. And so it really does surprise me that there's such a different medical community, but at the same time, very encouraging to see that there is a huge number of people that are very supportive, that do want to see this innovation, that truly believe it's not a small niche group. There's a lot of people that are doing a lot of great work, and even more that are there and wanting to, I think, advance what's happening right now.
I appreciate that. And that is so spot on, this divisiveness, the polarization of this topic. And, fairly so. At the end of the day, the experience is extremely subjective, but to know about it and to actually experience it, unless you're going to go to Peru, it is illegal. So it kind of puts you in a damned if you do, damned if you don't, which kind of dovetails well with my next question. Adam, do you have experience with psychedelic medicine? And if so, how has that guided your experience?
To be honest, I don't have experience with psychedelic medicine. Very curious about it, but just not something that I've gone through myself. I've certainly talked to a number of people that have gone through it and very passionate about it. Some of the doctors that we work with, there's no shortage of amazing stories that they can tell about people that they've worked with that have had, really, treatment resistant indications that haven't been able to find anything that's worked for them and for years, and have experienced psychedelics, and it's completely changed their lives. Working with veterans, which you mentioned before, and is a big expanding part of our business. Again, you can hear some great stories about how this has been able to positively affect people's lives. So I am definitely a big believer of this potential. And I think now we're at a critical crossroad where we're starting to really move from just some of these anecdotal stories into the hard facts and clinical trials and other data that some people have been really waiting to see.
I appreciate that. And I think, taking it from, let's call it the woo-woo, to the science and getting real research behind this, that's really going to be the tipping point. And I think once we get some sort of indication, whether it's treatment-resistant depression or bipolar or anxiety, then the rescheduling needs to occur on DEA and obviously at the Canada level. So I think there's a serious potential for opening this up quickly once the science is really firm and clear. Speaking of which, a little thought experiment for you, Adam. So let's just imagine for a second that you are some sort of drug czar for North America as a whole. So you've got carte blanche over Health Canada. You've got carte blanche over the DEA and the FDA. What are the first couple things that you would do?
Wow, that's a loaded question. That's that's a tough one. It's complex. There's a lot to unpack there. I guess there's two ways to look at it. One is, if you could scrap the whole system, how do you rebuild it? How do you make it better, more equitable? Because it's a system on both sides of the border that was built a long time, and we know has a lot of foundational problems to it. We know that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, no one's ripping these things apart and starting again. And in some cases, as you look at what to change, you kind of, for every question you answer, you bring up two or three more, and how do you solve it? Because there really is this black hole, and I think regulations are caught in a tricky point, especially in the US. The whole scheduling of drugs. And you look at so many of these that fall on, it's a Schedule 1 drug. Well, what does that mean? I'll put my hand up. I'm not a lawyer or expert, but from a very simplistic standpoint, these are things that have been deemed to have no medical benefit whatsoever. And at the same time, the DEA, who's the organization that's presenting this, they're not a medical organization. They're an enforcement organization. So I think number one is that part of the system is broken. You've got to take this whole idea of scheduling and building this around, take it out of enforcement hands. I think it's got to be more lab coats and less windbreaker and guns. If you think of the DEA, you think of narcos. You don't think of people advancing new medicine. So I don't think it makes sense that we give them that control. So I think first and foremost, this isn't an enforcement exercise. And that's probably something that needs to change. Secondly is, how do you get out of this trap? You're a Schedule I drug, which now we know some of these things are showing, incredible promise to treat people. But you've been told as a drug, you've got no real use. Therefore, we can't research you, because why would we ever do that? And, have resources and all of the risks. So there has to be a way to look at these. And even if it's under a very controlled environment, is how do we get more real research onto these things? And this has, I think, been one of the biggest stumbling blocks is we need the clinical evidence, but because of the scheduling, we make it incredibly difficult to actually do. So I think we need to open up the entire system to more research, make it more accessible, do more funding of it so that we can cut these timelines and the red tape, because I'm not sure what the risk is by actually providing data and doing clinical research. So I think that's where we face one of our biggest problems. And I think one of the easiest things, air quotes easy, because nothing's easy. And I think the system has become very politicized as well, which is problematic. Take that out of the equation.
I totally agree. There's too much red tape, too much almost emotion in this. But I really like that take you just said. Less guns and more lab coats on this problem. I think that is the path to the solution. So well put. One last little question for this deep dive together, Adam. What would you say to those that are apprehensive still about psychedelics?
Well, I guess it's what's the root for that apprehension? I think right now in today's environment, we're seeing lots of apprehension around lots of things, and people are being grouped together, but it's not for the same reasons. If you look at the COVID vaccine situation right now, there's a group of people that are, very against it, but it's not all for the same reasons. So I think apprehension's coming from a lot of different corners. There's no doubt some of it is just misinformation. So what can we do to help that and increase the amount of information that's available to people? I think we need to better explain the therapeutic benefits of some of these things, explain how they're being used by people. For the majority of these molecules and what's being contemplated, these are in clinic settings with medical professionals. And so that's a big difference than giving people a big jar of pills and sending them on their way. So I think we need to be able to articulate what it is that we're trying to do. I think, again, we need the research and the actual hard data to be able to show it. And I think a lot of that is being advanced right now.
Well put, Adam. Thank you for that insight. So that's it for the deep dive together. We've got one final segment. It's called the Speed Round Soul Search. And the idea is to kind of get a window into the soul of Adam, not just the business guy, but the man. So 4 questions, 10 seconds or less on the response, if you can. You ready?
All right, I'll try.
Okay, so actually this is apropos of that previous question. I appreciate that you have not done psychedelics because I think it brings objectivity. And some of the people that have engaged, myself included, sometimes just won't shut up about it. And we're too subjective about it. We're too in the weeds. And guys like you are good to have. But let's just say thought experiment. It's legal. It's everything is fine. You got the right set and setting. If you were to dive into your first set and setting psychedelic experience, what famous person, dead or alive, would you like to have that experience with?
Oh, wow. I wish I had some time to think about that. So I think there'd be a long list of guys that could be great. Oh, wow. How about, can I skip? Can I call a friend? What options do I have in this game here?
Well, you don't have to have 10 seconds on the response. You can noodle on it for a second if you want, but it's whoever comes to mind. Sports guy, icon, historical figure, anybody you want.
Oh, can we come back to this one? I feel like it's a great question. I need a minute to think about that one.
Okay. All right. Put that one in the subconscious. We're going to move on, but the questions don't get much easier. I got to warn you. All right. Question number 2, Adam, 10 years on a desert island and you only get to have one mind altering substance. Who you got?
And do I get multiple uses of this substance? Or is it a one shot?
Yes. As much as you need for that full 10 years on the island.
Oh, that's, you know what? I got to cite my lack of experience in this one. You know what? I would probably, I would probably have to revert back to having a cocktail if I was on a desert island. It seems much more beachy.
Not mad at that. Okay. Switching gears a little bit for question number 3. What is a lesson, Adam, that either your mother or your father taught you?
You know what? My parents were very big into experiences and just trying everything. And I think that's formed a lot of what I've done. So I think the openness to new experiences and really trying out different things has a huge stamp on the way you approach everything going forward. And I'll make up for my skip before, and we can go back to the question, but I'll give a second one, which is, it's a lesson my parents taught me. And then it was driven home by a coach that I had much later. I was deeply involved in sports, and it just involved resilience. And so, the coach, he said to me one day, he said, you know what, I can always tell the difference between the athletes that were, that had to still go to school when they were sick versus the ones that, always stayed home and could kind of dictate their own path and resilience. And I thought that was really interesting, the way he distilled it, but more importantly, just to start to build that resilience, which they definitely did for me.
That's good, Adam. I like that. This idea of the parents teaching you openness to experience, and then the coach, I'm a sports guy as well, having the coach talk about resilience and pushing through. I like that. Okay, last question number 4, and we'll round about to question number 1 if you can come up with an answer. Question number 4, a little bit of a different kind of question. There is a thought, and I'll tell you the first 3 parts of that thought, and all you have to do is finish it with that 4th part. So first 3 parts, Adam, there are rules. Some can be bent, others can be broken.
Some rules can be bent, others can be broken. That's a good one. I think in terms of bending a rule, I don't know if we're talking about kind of social moral rules, or we're talking about actual laws codified out there. But I'm a firm believer that that sometimes that you do have to you have to bend the truth, but you can never break the truth. I think you don't want to lie, but there are occasions where sometimes you may have to, you have to give people that optimism. You have to fuel things, or you have to kind of soften the blow for people. And, I think, but you have to, at the same time, there has to be truths. You have to have a moral compass. So I think, I don't know if it's a 2-part question or I answered it in one, but I think that's one that you can bend, but you can't break.
Okay. Adam, do you want to have a stab at that celebrity, famous, dead or alive?
You know what? I think I've kind of come up with with two names.
Hit me.
And so one is just, I think, led an incredible life, and I don't know if he's necessarily the person that is right with the psychedelic experience or not. But Nelson Mandela, if I had a chance to sit down with him and have a deep, meaningful experience, I think that would be absolutely amazing. The other one is kind of interchangeable, and if I can get both, I think it would be great. But I am a sports fan. I think that Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal are both really interesting people, but they're hilarious together. And I think being locked up in a room with them on an experience like that would be pretty crazy.
Adam, I love that answer. Charles Barkley is actually one of my role models, and he was one of these guys where I was a little bit on the fence about the vaccine. And in this interview, he said, "Any of you guys that aren't getting the vaccine, you're just an asshole." And I was like, "All right, Chuck, fine, I'll get the vaccine." Love that answer. Okay. Lastly, Adam, where can the listeners find you? Any action items, anything you'd ask of them for the viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? We're a newer company out there. So we love getting more eyes on us and watching what we're doing. And we got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. So our website is Ketamine.one. You can find us there. That's probably the best way to keep up to date. Sign up to our mailing list, and that's going to be your best way to follow what we're doing and to see all the areas that we're going to be expanding into.
Excellent. Well, congrats on the success. I'll put that link in the description. Adam Deffett, CEO of Ketamine One, thank you for joining the show.
Ray, it's great chatting today. Thanks a lot.
Okay, producer Kevin, it's time for our final segment of the show. This segment is called A Slap and a Clap. So the slap goes to Pear Therapeutics. Filing a patent for software or digital therapeutics is a rookie move. And I'm lucky. I've got years in tech, and I grew up with a patent attorney in the house. But don't take my word. Go look for software patent filings or disputes from any of the successful tech companies. There's a reason they don't do it, because it is a fool's errand. One of the many reasons is a patent needs definiteness. In other words, fixed. The beauty of software, when done right, is that it's upgraded and enhanced once a week, oftentimes. Now, that's the opposite of definiteness. Pear Therapeutics, you didn't do your homework, did you? Okay. And finally, the clap. A round of applause goes to Global Track and the Psychedelic Spotlight. Now, seeing their news videos was one of the first signs for me that, oh, yes, this psychedelic movement is real. And it's great to see people creating relevant, helpful content in psychedelics now. Their show is well produced, and I like their team, Flores, Tribbett, and this new guy, Halifax. A clap and a round of applause to Psychedelic Spotlight. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you to Adam Deffett, producer Kevin. I am Ray Christian. See you next time.